today, let's talk about where I came from. Little town up there in northwest Canby, Oregon. I was 45 minutes south of Portland. So our annual rainfall wasn't much different than Seattle's. I think we only was a few inches less on our annual rainfall than it was up there, and so not a lot of opportunity, as far as being outside. A team roping, Arizona really took off and is still taking off to this day. But like in the 90s when I was a kid, I remember Arizona and California is where kind of your team roping originated from. And I think a lot of that had to do was the weather. A lot of opportunity from that. We didn't really have that opportunity up there. We roped inside the majority of the seasons. I bet we probably roped inside 3/4 of a year. With your June, July, August, and a little September, would be outside. But after that, it started raining. And so my dad was a big team roping fan. I would say that my family dynamic was probably a little bit, I would probably a lot dysfunctional. I didn't know no better, so it's easy to look back at it now and kind of go, "Wow, that was interesting." My dad was married to a wife and four daughters when he met my mom, and I I always tell everyone I was basically a beer garden incident. I came about kind of on an accident, and so my dad was married with four daughters, who he ended up continuing being married to the same lady for the rest of his life. When he'd had a rough childhood, moved around a lot, he fought a lot. He was a Marine. Ended up listening to the service. He got married. Had my older brother, half brother Kurt, and great man, about as nice of a guy as you'll ever meet. And then that didn't work out, and so he met the wife he was married to till he died, and they had four girls. And so when I came about in this dysfunctional process, they still continue to stay married, and how that works looking back on it was just beyond me. But the one thing I remember, the bond that my dad and I had that I'll never forget, was he didn't care. He didn't care what everyone else thought. He didn't care about any of that situation. I think he really felt like he had another chance to have a son, and I was him, and I think this was his chance to have that bond again. And I don't think it was where he wanted it to be earlier, and I think at this point in time he was really wanting a son, and he didn't care. He didn't care how the situation was. He, from what I remembered, basically brought me back to his house and with four daughters and a wife, and said, this is my son. Like it or leave it, or not like it and leave, from what I understood, is how he basically introduced me. So, of course, I'm sure my sisters, there was a lot of, he didn't have us that close niche. They were all a little older. I was the youngest, and my mom, she had a son before that. So my older brother, he was 10 years older than me, and so I was the youngest out of all those siblings around, which didn't really have a very close relationship with any of them because I was quite a bit younger. And so that was the family dynamic that you look back at and you're like, whew, it was interesting. The Pee Wee rodeos was really interesting. We had my mom on one side and my dad and his wife on the other, and the talk that went on was a lot. As a kid, you grew up with a lot of insecurities because you grow up, listening to the naysayers, talking about you behind your back, and about how you kind of came about. But it didn't really just bother me a whole lot looking back at it. It was a little insecure about it, but for the most part, it just kind of is what it was, and just kind of rocked on. And so I don't remember how old my dad was when he brought me back to his house, and we started riding. A lot of it was just kind of him and me. And so, I always knew that my dad had my back when it came to things like that. That was a bond that him and I had early, and no matter what was being said, he didn't care. This was my son, and so that bond him and I had was very special. Now it got complicated obviously when I got older, and I think expectations of what he thought I should be and how I should do it started creating a lot of friction. And of course, I turned rebel against any authority and how teenagers do. And so when it got a little older, it obviously changed, which does that's kind of pretty natural. But I would bet when I started roping, I don't know, I was probably between 5, 6, 7, I think, somewhere in that at that point. And I remember the first day my dad got me on a horse, I fell off. He led me out there across the gravel road, and we walked. It was about a mile from our house to the river, and he was going to take me on a ride to the river. And he was on a colt, and he was leading me on a bronchi horse called Shorty, and pulled back notoriously, bucked notoriously. Just not anything I'd ever put my boy on, but that's just the way things were back then. You just didn't quite think as much about the consequences then, and that is the reason why I think cowboys were a little bit rougher and tougher back then as well. But so he was leading me across the railroad tracks down a gravel road, and we was going to the river. And as we got close to the river, is where you walk up underneath the railroad tracks, underneath of a bridge, and to get on the other side. And I remember a train come by and was going over the railroad tracks, and my dad's colt acted up, and the horse that I was on pulled back and pulled the lead rope out of his hands. And so, of course, the horse got scared and ran back to the house. So here I am running about 3/4 of a mile back to the house, holding onto the horn, screaming and hollering. I look like, my dad said I look like Whiplash, that little monkey that rides the border collie, all the way back to the barn. And when you got to the gravel road up to the house, well, there's a sharp right turn on the other side of the barn, between the barn and the house. And he said that horse went right, and I went straight into the bushes and wiped out, and kept my face up a little bit, got a couple raspberries here and there on my knees and on my elbows, and of course cried. And he led up there and walked up there and said, "Well, if you're going to be a cowboy, you're going to have to learn how to dust yourself and get back on." So he said I did, and he said, "Well, I figured if he got a little stick to him, maybe this kid might have some try." So we spent the rest of the day riding. We stayed in the arena this time, which I guessing that my dad was learning a little bit more about how to keep your kid alive after the first incident. So I guess we stayed in the arena after that. And he said I rode all day, and he said I stayed hooked. He said I kind of had he always told me, he said I felt like after that you might have a little bit of try to you. So that was my first riding experience. And my dad was a pretty hard man. I was the only one that really had much interest in roping. The rest of the girls and even my brother, they roped a little bit, but he was pretty hard on them. He was hard on them, took their confidence away a lot, and they just said, "To hell with it, I'm not going to do it." And, he was a little bit easier on me, but it was still there. But you could tell he was really trying through my younger years to be a little bit more encouraging in my younger years, and then it obviously turned pretty critical later, as we got closer to high school. But yeah, he put a rope in my hand shortly after that, and I just remember it didn't take me very long to pick it up. He would show me how to swing the rope, and I think I caught one of my first loops, I think, as I took a shot at it. And he, of course, Dad would always, "Oh my gosh, you caught one already!" And then and that pumps you up, because anytime you're good at something, you want to keep doing it. And it felt pretty natural. The rope felt pretty natural in my hand. And my dad, he used to enter some rodeos, and I was a big fan. I used to love going to the rodeos. I used to love going and watching him, and rooted for him. And rodeo was just kind of a part of my life. Now, it wasn't overdid though back then, I think, like it is now. We come down here to Texas, it's all year long, 365 days a week. When I grew up, it was more seasonal. The ropings were more in the summers. Football was more in the fall. We played a little basketball in the winter, and then I tried to play a little bit of baseball and stuff like that, in the spring. But that was starting to kind of interfere with some Pee Wee rodeos that I was enjoying going to, and so I played it for a little while and loved sports. I really loved sports, but roping and rodeo was just it was kind of a passion that started. I was able to be around a lot of the top guys when I was growing up. My dad had a good reputation for good horses, and we also had an arena. And so I remember we grew up down the road. Where I grew up down the road was St. Paul, Oregon. That was one of the better rodeos in the Northwest. It was a very, very prestigious rodeo. So a lot of your top guys came there. Your Jake Barnes, Clay O'Brien Cooper, Charles Pogue, Steve Northcotts, Leo Camarillo, and whoever he was roping with. I just remember a lot of the top guys that were there that we'd watch, Bobby Hurley, Dennis Gates, and a lot of them come and stay at the house. My stepmom, she would film all the team roping, and then we had an arena with steers. Back then to have an arena was kind of like this day and age having an indoor arena. It was kind of rare in a way. And of course it wasn't like it was a nice arena. Don't get me wrong, it was more like Johnny Cash's song, we'll build it one piece at a time. Dad get enough money and buy a panel, and we put it up, and buy a panel, and we put it up. And I remember our chute, we used to call it the rhino pen. The neighbors, they steer wrestled, so they built this big chute that you could steer wrestle. You could shoot dog out of it. So you get in there with the steer and you'd open it, and they could shoot dog out of it to get ready for steer wrestling. And it was a huge chute, so the nickname was Rhino Shooting. It was fascinating just to look back at the times on how things were then, and then you look at the automatic pre-fruits that you have nowadays, and it's very, very comical to look back. But we loved it, and that was just what it was. And you get those guys coming to the house and coming roping with you, and I'd rope the cowboy toy with them as they was watching videos. My stepmom used to cook this big. She was notorious for a chicken dinner. She had great fried chicken, and those guys get to come eat, come watch their runs, get to practice. I remember turning steers for like Leo Camarillo as a kid, and it's hard not to kind of be infatuated with it especially when you're from the outside looking in. I was an outsider. I was getting to look at the team roping NFR guys from the outside, where it was very, very romantic. They get to do whatever they wanted. Didn't seem like the rules applied to them. They were free. They were so full of life. Like when they would come, they were so much fun. I remember just the stories, sitting down and listening to them over dinner, and Bobby Hurley and Dennis Gates were there one time, and just telling rodeo stories and just how great of storytellers they were. And it was very hard to not think that that's what would be a great life. None of them really talked that much about how broke they were. None of them talked about how hard it was and things like that. It was just talking about getting from one rodeo to the next and trying to get to the NFR. And so it was very fun to love. And I remember Mike Beers, he spent a lot of time. Him and my dad were pretty good buddies, and my dad rode some horses for him. And Mike Beers rode a couple horses of my dad's and really, really liked him. And a lot of people tried to buy. My dad had, I think, about 3 horses that were really good, and a lot of the top guys wanted to buy. And so him and Mike became good friends. And so I remember when I was a young kid, they used to stagger the events from St. Paul and Molalla, Oregon, the 2 rodeos that night. So what I mean by stagger is they would make the times work, because the rodeo was only probably 40 minutes away from each other. The towns were only about 40 minutes away. And so you could make the team roping at Molalla and the team roping again that night at St. Paul pretty easy. But you had to hustle, but you could make it. And so I remember just being in the rig sometimes with him and Matt Tyler, and I'd jump on his horse out in the middle of the arena while he'd jump in my mom and dad's car and go work the calf roping. And I just remember the stories of when he would jump in their car and he'd make this 40-minute trip in 20 minutes, and passing cars going down the road and jumping on the sidewalks just to pass another car on the right side, and passing cars on the left and right, all that stuff you're not supposed to do, and breaking the speed limit laws, doing 100 miles an hour, and running by the gate man, slide the car to a stop, jumping over the gate as they're calling his name. This calf horse right there saddled there at St. Paul, and he gets on and wins the round, gets the victory lap. And, as a kid, you're like, why would you want to do anything else? This is the coolest thing in the world. So rodeoing was always very romantic to me at that age. It was just such a cool fantasy that this is a profession that's almost larger than life. And so that really kind of had me hooked on the rodeo scene as far as that goes. And so as I was growing up and battling between football and roping, that was kind of my two passions. And as I kind of got a little bit older, I started roping a little bit more. We're talking 8, 9, 10, things like that. And I started winning some dummy ropings. And as a young kid, really, I remember being very infatuated, kind of like my son Creed is, with carnival rides and going to the fairs and things like that. Well, I ended up winning second at this dummy roping. Well, I had hardly ever practiced roping the dummy much. It just kind of was one of them opportunities where there was a dummy roping, and so I threw $1 in it and ended up winning second and winning enough money where I got to go ride quite a few rides. And I was like, man, if I tried really hard at this, I'll bet I could win that thing next time. And man, I bet I could go to the carnival all day. And so I ended up started kind of roping the dummy a little bit more and started seeing if I could rope from a little further back. And for long, I ended up winning the next dummy roping. They'd have these little weekly and monthly jackpots, and they would usually always have dummy ropings with them. And then for long, within 1 week or a couple weeks, there's usually a dummy roping with all these jackpots. And so I think the next one I went to maybe or something like that, I ended up winning it. And then after that, I was like, well, man, if I stayed hooked, then maybe I could win the buckle at the end of the series. Because you only have these little series where during the summertime where they have so many dummy ropings, and the person with the most points wins a buckle. And so then for long, I've got set my goals of, well, if I practice a little bit harder, now I can win a buckle. Sure enough, I get that done, and then now I kind of start to get a little bit more hooked on this whole team roping thing. And it really was, it was hard to get hooked because the better I got, the more my dad kind of got harder on me because the expectations got harder to live up to. But I remember he stuck me on a horse, and I think I roped, it was a Jersey cow, and we had some jerseys there at the house. And I remember the first one I chased, I caught him and turned, and it did nothing but make it worse for the next one, because then I missed the next one, or then I might bounce the next one out of the strip and shoots, or then after that, now I'm dallying before I turn, and about cutting my hand off and terrible handles, and then of course then you're dead. It went from really high to really low. We didn't have the four-wheelers and the Smarties and the things like that we have nowadays where you can kind of control it and build it up. It was the old school. You just back in the box and went at it till you figured it out. And so that was kind of how we got started. I did like it. I really did. But man, I loved football, and so I was kind of still struggling with the football and the roping, but then for long I started getting a little bit better at the roping, and then I was able to start entering some jackpots, and then I was able to start winning some buckles, jackpotting, and then I think when I was 11 is when I won my first saddle, and I was able to win it at the jackpots my dad went to there in Viola, Oregon. And it was against his peers, a lot of the guys the same age as him, and it was a draw pot. I mean, I got lucky. I turned all the steers, and everyone caught behind me, but I won it. And that really did light a fire. That really, I remember a big passion kind of came and got up underneath me after that one. That one meant a lot to me right there. That got me going. So I started going with Dad to almost all the jackpots now. Now him and I, we went together. We hit all the jackpots together. I was his main header at that time now, and starting to get a lot of other partners. And I always grew up roping against people older than me. Well, then as I kind of start progressing into high school, well, now it's kind of time to start. And I'd been going to some. He'd hauled me around to some rodeos and some breakaway rodeos and stuff, and I did okay, on and off here and there. But I'd tell you where I struggled was when I got to my first high school rodeo and roping amongst my peers. That was interesting. That was a pressure I had never felt. I think that pressure to do better than them, and the fact that I never really grew up much roping against people my own age. It was always going to jackpots roping with my dad's friends and people older than me. And so for the first time I'm roping against my peers, I was pretty nervous. And not only that, you were battling with girls, and trying to impress girls at that age, being a teenager and being a boy and full of testosterone. And so, of course, you're really doing a lot of things that are kind of getting in your own way at that age, which I'm pretty sure we've all remembered that stage, and some kids that are still currently going through it. And so, my first year of high school rodeo was not very successful. I rode pretty good, but I think I had a chance to definitely make state, or excuse me, at state finals. I had a very good chance right there to come back and win, to do good enough to make the nationals. And I missed my last year in the short round to make nationals, and that was extremely devastating for me. I took losses very hard. It's kind of an emotional kid, a little bit internally, and that shirt. Wear that shirt on your sleeve. They say you wear your emotions on your sleeve. I would say that was me. I was a hard kid, but in the same sense, when you hurt my feelers, I took it hard, and I took losses hard. I That one hurt. That was something that I thought I could win state my freshman year, and heck, I didn't even make nationals. So it was a good learning curve. It was really good. It helped me learn to deal with adversity. It helped me started to learn how to rope amongst my peers. And so the next year, I roped a little bit better, and then end up having the same situation 365 days later, where I was able to, if I catch this last one here at state, I go to the nationals, and I won the short round. And I remember what that felt like. I was like, that's what redemption feels like. That right there is when I put myself in the same situation and I don't mess up again. And I started learning from a lot of things like that. I believe my next year I got a lot more consistent. I don't think I missed a steer my junior year. And then my senior year made nationals again, and then my senior year roped good. Started getting some pretty good horses under me. I had to make my own horses. I remember my dad bought me one horse when I was a young kid, and it didn't work out very good. And I popped off and said, "Well, maybe it's easier to make them than it is to buy them." And he said, "Well, sounds good to me." So we started finding all these horses that people gave us, or there was a heck of a deal on, or just yeah, we. But that's just kind of what we knew. We weren't poor, but we were definitely middle class. My dad grew up. He was a good horseman, but he was an electrician. He climbed poles. He was a lineman for the power company, and so he got his journeyman climbing poles, and then ended up becoming a special tester. Kind of working the ranks up there through PGE as I was growing up. And my stepmom, she worked at a chicken plant and then a battery plant, and my mom cut hair. So, I mean, we were just, I would say, lower middle class. I wouldn't say poor by any means, but you kind of had to work for what you got, and that was just kind of how our place worked. And so, we grew up where we made our own horses, and my dad was a way better horseman than me. He would spend way more time with them, and I was just wanting to rope. But I had some decent horsemanship skills. At best, would be decent. And so I just kind of learned how to ride a lot of different animals, and rode a few outside horses throughout the years. That kind of, paid for, a lot of things. And my dad's goal was to teach me how to ride better and get horses under me and be a good horseman. And my senior year, I think I finally won state, and my horses were getting better, and I was starting to rope pretty good. And one of the things I would say that really turned the page too was, I think it was my sophomore year. I jackpotted really good. I struggled rodeoing. And I remember my junior year was one of the first times I roped against the big guys, like the Leo Camarillos, the D Pickett's, the Shane Schwankies of the Northwest. Jason Stewart was somebody I looked up to. He was older than me. And all the circuit guys, Mike Fuller, Shane Crosley, Troy Frazier, Wade Jess, the top guys at that realm. Well, Rufus, Oregon was one of the first places they had the USTRC ropings, and it was a big one where a lot of the guys came up there to it. And B.J. Campbell and I, entered the 10 incentive, and we just entered the incentive. We entered the open roping, but it had a 10 incentive. And so we were just there for the 10 incentive money. Well, we just ran right through them and ended up winning the whole thing, winning the open, beating all the guys, all the top Northwest guys. That was a big deal. I had never been in that situation before. And that's when I kind of started thinking, man, maybe I could do this. Maybe this is something I could do. And I started realizing I could play football pretty good, but I didn't just believe that I had the talent to make it. I kind of believed that if I tried hard enough, maybe I could be maybe a college player at a very small school. And I had good football IQ. I played quarterback. I grew up playing running back and wide receiver. I could catch pretty good, and defensive end, played safety. I had a good football IQ where I could play a lot of positions and things like that. But my speed was terrible. I could not run. I could not run a lick, and I really didn't feel like that was going to be where I was going to be successful. When I won that roping up there in Rufus my sophomore year, that's when I kind of started thinking, hey, I might have a chance to get good at this. And so what I noticed was my jackpotting was real good, but when I'd get to the rodeos, that's when I was kind of struggling a little bit, and that's where the high school rodeos really helped me learn how to make sure I could catch no matter what. Because their high school rodeos at that point in time, that's really what it was. It was just the fact that I didn't have a chance to warm up like I did like at a jackpot. Like I had to be ready for that one steer, and that took me a little while to learn. A lot of times you nod, just blank out, and all of a sudden you call your rope up, and you're like, what happened? I had to go through that a lot, learning how to win, learning how to get enough reps where things slowed down so you could see things coming. And amateur rodeoed pretty good, never could win the associations or anything like that. Was making the amateur finals, but I never could win, like the year end. Sam Willis, that was a guy, and Mike Fuller, those guys up there, you couldn't beat them at that age, at my age anyway. And so I remember after my senior year, I got my permit in high school. So after I ended up winning state, and got my permit, and I was entering the rodeos up there with Shane Crosley, which was one of my mentors growing up. And he was a great man. He put up with a lot. And I ended up having a good head horse that was named Skeeter. He was a bronky bucking sucker, and I had a decent horse called Razor that I made both of them, and I started going to the circuit rodeos and having some success. I made the circuit finals and did good at some rodeos, and kind of felt like I could kind of hang with them a little bit, and end up making the short round at Ellensburg. And I remember I choked and hit one right in the back of the head. And it kind of knocked my sales out of me a little bit. And I started thinking, I'm not really sure if I've got what it takes to be against these guys. A lot of them had a couple different horses. It was good. I got my feet wet. But I was like, man, I'm not sure if I'm ready yet. And so I wanted to take a year off. And I wanted to go to college. And I wanted to amateur rodeo and get some more horses put together to where one of my goals was when I started, I wanted to win Rookie of the Year. And so once I got out of high school, I enrolled up there in Lewiston, Idaho. Mike Fuller was a rodeo coach up there, and they'd had a team that they were trying to get put together up there, and they had a lot of the top guys that were supposed to go up there. And me and Ryan Gallagher he was one of my really good friends growing up, and we were all a bunch of us going to head up there and go kick their butts in the college rodeos. Well, half of us showed up. Me and Ryan Gallagher did. So we went up there and rodeoed for a little bit, and it really wasn't kind of what we kind of felt like it was supposed to be kind of promised in one way. And the fact of there really wasn't a lot of things to do up there. It was kind of away from everywhere, but didn't stop me. Man, I still traveled from Lewiston, Idaho to Prineville, Oregon to go to any jackpot I could go to. I remember it was 6 hours, I think, from Lewiston, Idaho to Prineville, Oregon. Well, Prineville used to have some winter jackpots. Well, we'd load up in my single cab dually Dodge with a camper and a 4-horse lead sled trailer. And I remember me and Victor Eros and Brett McDowell and Ryan Gallagher, we'd load up in that thing and I mean, we'd hit every jackpot. It didn't matter if it's snowing or not. We just chain up. I mean, sometimes we didn't chain up. It was one of those things where if there was something going on, we were going to it. It just seemed like that opportunity up there, though, that it just didn't seem like it was at that level where everybody else was at. And I just felt like the whole time I needed to go find that. But I was like, but I'm there, so let's go win the region. And after I went to the college rodeos, I roped okay, but man, I didn't rope smart at all. I was always constantly just trying to be fast instead of being smart. And when I kind of started learning to be a little bit smarter about it, I kind of battled back. But a guy named David Ferris just kept staying steady the whole time, and he kicked my ass at the end of the year, and I went in second in the region. And I learned a lot from that. I was like, man, I've got to learn how to rope, how to start kind of being me. I'm not doing a good job because I'd noticed in high school I did the same thing. My first couple of years, I was trying to impress everybody, and then when I kind of settled back in, I started finding a way to be consistent and making it work. And so I learned a lot from that. But I realized I needed to get out of the Northwest. I needed to get to where they roped a lot more. So team roping, in my opinion, kind of originated from California. And at that point in time, it was kind of migrating from California over to Arizona. I believe the weather had a lot to do with it. The weather was really good, but your top guys were hanging out there quite a bit. So when I got done rodeoing there for a year, I amateur rodeoed up there. I went with Sam Willis. I didn't buy my card. I really was trying to win. I was trying to win all the amateur associations. Well, I won second in all of them. Sam Willis, uh, he, he did the same thing all the rest of them did. They just kept being, he was consistent as I was trying to be fast, and just taught me a lesson on how you win the year end by being consistent. And like I said, they were always trying to tell me that, and they always trying to show me that, but I just never was picking it up. And so I learned a lot that year, seasoned a horse, and next year I felt like I was ready to go and enter the PRCA rodeos. So when I went to the college finals that year in '97, um, I got to talk to the rodeo coach at CAC, Central Arizona College, there in Casa Grande, Arizona, and so Var Myers. So I ended up getting me a scholarship to go down there to go rope and go to school. Well, I had to sit out the first couple rodeos because of the transfer, and went down there and did really good jackpotting. Like was making some money jackpotting against the top guys. Like I was doing pretty good. And my senior year of high school, I was doing the same. My senior year of high school in '96 when I graduated, my jackpots were really good. I was beating a lot of the circuit guys. I was beating a lot of the other guys, the U.S. Open ranks and match opens and things like that. So my jackpotting was doing real good. Well, when I went down to Arizona, it continued. Um, was winning right off the bat at the jackpots. Started going to the college rodeos, new region. A lot of people had heard about me, kind of the same thing. I was trying to show off. I was trying to live up to whatever I guess the pressure was, and didn't rope very good. Ended up making the college finals. I got invited to go to the college finals. I think Brett McDowell roped with him up there. And the first year I went to the college finals with Ryan Gallagher. Him and I roped there. Didn't do that great either time at the college finals. But I ended up roping with Shane Sproul at the college rodeos and started off at the PRCA rodeos when Shane used to heel. And started off gangbusters when I got my card. I think we did good at El Paso. We did good at Phoenix. We did really good at Denver. I think we placed at San Antonio. And then when that summer I decided I was roping with Brett McDowell. He was one of my high school buddies that I grew up roping with and always wanted to rope with. And so we finished out the year up there in the Northwest going to all the rodeos and a lot of the bigger rodeos. This was the first time now. Now I'm branching out, going to Reno, going to Cody, Wyoming, going to a lot of the big rodeos and still a little bit of the circuit rodeos, trying to win that rookie. And ended up getting it done. I ended up winning Rookie of the Year in 1998. Had a couple decent horses, and I got my butt kicked. I dang sure I won it, but man, I got a lot of bloody noses in the process. And so I went back to CAC, back to college again for my third year of college after I won Rookie of the Year, and continued to keep going to the building rodeos while I was going to college. But I really set a goal was to first I wanted to make sure I could shoe. My dad taught me how to shoe horses, and CAC had a good shoeing program. And so I wanted to make sure I could dang sure know how to shoe. And I was also able to keep myself alive by shoeing with a guy named Sean Harrelson, the goon down there in Arizona. He kept me alive. That guy did, and he was one of my good friends. I still see him every once in a while at the timed event and talk to him every once in a while on the phone. He kept me alive. He really helped me learn how to shoe, and I wanted to make sure that like this was going to be my last year of college. I wanted to win the region and I wanted to win the nation. So I really, really focused hard on that and was able to get pretty close. That year, I never missed a steer. I kind of got back to being comfortable again. I started learning how the rodeos were working. I knew where they were at. I knew what to expect. My strategy of what my game plan was getting better, and never missed a steer my third year in college and won the region with Trey Miller and Bobby Bays. And so I made the college finals with Trey Miller. And so when we went to college finals that year, I'm like, we're going to win this thing. And didn't make a very good run on the first one, won the second round, made a good run in the third round, come back, won the short round, and put some pressure on Matt Funk and Kane Garcia, but it wasn't enough. They beat us. So I ended up winning second in the nation. But I was getting pretty comfortable in the fact that my horse herd was getting better. I was starting to get more consistent now. I was starting to see the consistency of it. I was getting some success. And then my good horse died. He ended up dying of an aneurysm. And so now I'm down to my backup horse. So that kind of set me back. I had a pretty good first string horse. He was a bronchi bucking sucker, but he was good and he fit me. And I won a lot on him. And so when he went down, that set me back. It was kind of like, man, I was just almost there, and then it dropped again. And so now I'm kind of in that struggle stage once I got out of college, to where I kept thinking, man, I want to make the NFR. I got to make the NFR. I got to make the NFR. That was my sights. That was my goals. But man, when I look back at it now, it was amazing all the steps I was skipping, putting that goal there. And that's just part of learning. It really is. You learn so much when you're down in the dumps, when you're down in the trenches, when you're scraping the bottom of that barrel. And I had to revamp my horses, and couldn't hardly get no one to rope with me. 99, 2000, 2001. That was a rough, dark period for me. That was when it was hard for people I couldn't get partners. I didn't have the right horses. I was moving around all the time, trying to find just kind of a gig, more or less, shoeing, riding horses, just trying to get amongst the guys, and it was just taking me a little while to find it. And in 2001, Chris Lawson offered me a job in Salado, Texas, and riding horses for him. And I was living at the wildfire place there in Salado, where they had the wildfire opens, Billy Pipes' arena. And so I really wasn't just kicking butt, I mean, I wasn't getting no better. I was just kind of using my skills, but I was plateauing. And I was partying probably a little bit more than I should, but I was just kind of staying stagnant. And I was still good friends with Jason Stewart and Bucky Campbell, and they were kicking butt. That's when they were doing good. And Jason Stewart had a place in Llano, Texas, which was amongst where all the top guys were at. Well, the one thing that I stayed around the top guys was the fact that I could shoe. So if anyone was blowing a shoe or needed a horse shod, I was kind of the guy out there on the road that they would kind of hunt down. And then some guys would send horses to me a little bit here and there too to ride. And so I got invited. Jason and Bucky invited me to come out there and shoe their horses one time in Llano as I was staying in Salado. And so I got out there and I was shoeing their horses and getting a rope with them. And I was able to get on some of Jason Stewart's horses. And I started noticing that, like, every time one of my horses would go down, that when I'd get on one of their horses, I noticed how good I roped. Jason Stewart had this good horse named Parr. And I remember I got on him somewhere and would have won the round, but my partner roped a leg. And I was like, man, that never happens to me. Like I'd never won a second round before. And I remember Richard Eguren let me on Calhoun, that yellow horse that Trevor Brazile bought. He let me on him one time when one of my horses went down. And I would have won the first round and my partner got a leg. And I'm like, I started noticing there's something to having these good horses. And I kept noticing that, like, my ability was there, but my horses weren't there. But nothing really clicked until one day when I was out there in Llano, Texas, and I was at Jason Stewart's house, and we were watching some video that Rich Skelton had. And it was an interview with Popeye Boltinghouse. And I remember to this day, he said, it's not how much you can win on a horse, but how much a horse keeps you from winning. And that's when I looked at my horses and went, that's me. The amount of times I kept telling myself, well, I can't sell them. I still win on them. But then when I started looking back at all the money they had cost me, and another quote I had heard was that you don't know what a good horse is until you've been on a good horse. And that was when I started noticing that my horses was not up to par. Next day, they were for sale. I sold what was basically a glorified practice horse that I had. And then I also sold my good horse at the time. His name was Razor. He was a really good horse. I had trained him. He was easy. You could head on him. You could heel on him. He wasn't special as far as PRCA, but he was a great public horse. And I started noticing coming to my niche was I could make a nice public horse. They'd score good. They'd run up there and rate. They knew their jobs. They'd log. They'd face. They would they could heel on him. They would go around the corner, match up to the steer. They would stop. Nothing flashy, but easy. And so I ended up selling that horse for a lot of money at the time, which was like $15,000, which was a lot back then. And so I was like, I need to get a horse herd built up. Well, this is when Speedy Williams had showed up. This is when Speedy Williams started taking over everything. And so one of the things Speedy had was he had Viper in the indoor rodeos, the shorter setups, and he had Bob. That was the horse he won the BFI on, Salinas, Cheyenne. That was his outside horse. So that was one thing I noticed is that guy's strategy right there on horses right there. He had a couple different sets of horses. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to adopt that strategy. And so Jason Stewart had a horse he kept letting me on every time I would go over there to Llano, and I would just win on this horse. This horse let me win. Now, his name was Peppy, and Kevin Stewart won the George Strait on him in, I think, the late 90s, if I remember right, maybe 97. Well, Peppy was a little bit of an outlaw, too. I'd kind of noticed that I started having this niche for outlaw horses. I don't know why. I don't know if our personalities fit. I'm not real sure, but there was something to that. And him and I loved that horse, and no one else did. And when I got on that horse, he let me rope. He let me win. I grew up starting and riding my own horses, training my own horses. This was one of the first times I got on a horse, and I thought about roping. And I'm like, I need this horse. He was a little older. He wasn't sound. He had a stick drove up his hind leg and underneath of his leg. And I believe when his muscles grew back together, there was some atrophy there, and the muscles tightened up, and so it didn't allow his leg to step all the way forward. But for the majority, they said he's sound enough. He just walks with a limp. And so I bought him. I'm like, you know what? Every time I got on him, I roped good. I was confident. Now, I don't even think the horse could back up. He wasn't broke, but he let you win. And I was like, I need him. So that needs to be my horse right there that I have that I can trust. And so as I was still riding horses there in 2001 in Salado with Chris Lawson, there was this one horse that kind of continued to stand out to me, but I really didn't put much emphasis on it. And his name was Armadillo. He didn't have that name there, but I named him that later. He didn't really have a name. I think they called it Red. And he had a racing set of papers. He was a racehorse, and I liked the horse. He was a real sweet horse. Didn't have much personality, but he was just a real sweet horse. He was real nice. But he just did not know what he was doing. He had no clue. He didn't even know there's a cow in the arena. And so we'd been riding for a little while, and I kept noticing him run, but he just had no control. And I remember Chris Lawson came out one day with some contraptions on him that was going to help get this horse to rate. And of course, I was a kind of an arrogant little kid, what are you doing with all that stuff on, and this and that. He's like, well, I'm going to try something. I got to try something. You ain't doing nothing. I'm like, I bet a 12 pack I can get this horse rated by the end of the week. He's like, well, you've been on him for how long? Now you're going to, it's like, well, bet me. Bet me I can't. So he's like, I bet you a 12 pack you can't. I said, all right, you're on. Well, then I kind of just took it seriously. I started riding twice a day. And I started in the arena. I would just turn a steer loose, and I just run up there and track the calf or the steers or whatever it is we had that was slow. Back then we didn't have the four-wheelers and the dummies. So we had to just turn stuff loose out in the arena. And so I would just get something that was slow enough where I could trot in there or lope in there behind it and show it where its lane was, show us where its position was, and I would just heel the steer and just throw heel loops. And when I would throw, just get him to where he would start when I would throw, let off, and try to find a spot and get consistent with him. And then in the evenings, Billy Pipes' kids would rope, and so I would put a rope on and turn a steer out there in the middle of the arena, and I'd rope them one time and just turn steers for the kids. Just run up there and rope to go follow them the back end, get it tight, work on logging this horse, teaching them how to pull steers and face. And I remember turning his kids, 5, 6, 7 steers in the arena. And then after that, then we would go ahead and rope steers out of the arena that evening. And so we kind of kept stair-stepping it that way, and I'd score about 10 and rope about 5. And these were all medium-minus steers and trainer steers. And by 2 weeks, the sucker kind of got it figured out. And he could run. And I noticed when I'd show him the same thing, like he would pick it up. So I ended up getting my 12-pack, and I bought the horse. And I was like, well, this is about as close to Bob as I can find. Now he's going to take some work. He's green. But I'm going to try this on. And so I had a horse that I could trust and a horse that I could bring up. And so went back home in 2001, back in the Northwest, and started getting partners again, started winning again a little bit. I think me and Shane Crosby started roping again. And I was living with him, and it was one of the best times of my life. Like, I remember just getting to hang out with his kids. He taught me so much. I would say the one thing I learned from Shane Crosby was grace. When you broke something at my house, you're almost going to run for your life at my dad's house. There's going to be an ass whipping, there's going to be browbeating, there's going to be whatever. Well, when you break something at Shane Crosby's, like, well, let's go fix it. I'm like, we're not in trouble. No, let's go fix it. Now, try not to run into it, break it again, but we break things, we fix it. And oh man, that was one of the times that I started realizing it was like, man, I enjoyed that. That resonated with me. It was amazing what happened if you gave me a chance, how my perspective changed. Well, I kind of started noticing that too. That was kind of my soft spot for the horses. A lot of the horses that I would have was kind of about half renegade. They was kind of about half beaten up. And we was kind of the same. And it was funny how that was kind of my horse herd. And this Peppy horse that all of a sudden I just gave him a chance, this sucker started getting good. Armadillo, same thing. This horse right here, I gave him a chance right there. And man, he started trying hard for me. I started doing pretty good. I was roping good, but I wasn't winning enough, but I was roping pretty good. And it kind of between that 2000, 2001 era, I wasn't real sure if I kind of had what it took, though. I was kind of plateauing a little bit. I thought I should have made it by then. My expectations were too high. My goals were too high, and I wasn't giving up, but I was getting impatient. I was getting very impatient. And I started kind of thinking, man, I wonder if I'm just going to be a horseshoer and a horse trainer my whole life, because that's kind of what a lot of guys that end up quitting rodeo, and if they didn't have a ranch, that was kind of their backup. That was kind of plan B. And I was like, I hate that, but man, if it is, like, maybe, the one thing that I really wanted to do and really wanted to be also is I wanted to be a cowboy. I was a wannabe cowboy. Now, my dad always got me out every spring. One of our bonding moments that we had was we always went branding every spring. So we'd go out to Pendleton or the Central Oregon, and Eastern Oregon and places like that. And we'd always go brand every spring. Now, I wasn't a cowboy, but I wanted to be a cowboy. And I always go to Jason Stewart's ranch when I came back from college and got to go up there and brand. And, any chance I'd ever get to go to a brand, and I always went. So I always wanted to be a cowboy. And, man, to be a cowboy, you had to be able to ride a bucking horse. And I could not ride a bucking horse. And so I was like, I kind of plateaued there in 2000, 2001, kind of right there a little bit. And I was like, if I'm going to be if this is as good as I'm going to get, I want to learn how to be a bronc rider. And so I remember Shane Crosby and we started going to the rodeos there toward the end of the year in Pendleton, and I started getting behind the bucking chutes, and I was watching how the bronc riding went. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna learn how to ride one of these. If I'm gonna ride outside horse, I got to learn to ride a bucking horse. And if I'm gonna be a cowboy, I got to be a bronc rider. And so I started thinking, I think I'm gonna be a bronc rider. So I had it in my mind, all right, in this spring or this winter, I'm gonna try to find some guys right there. I might go to the college and see if I can get them some horses and see if I started researching, think there's some guys I could get in front of and start riding some broncs. And that fall, after Cow Palace, my phone rings. Bucky Campbell calls. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing, Chuck?" I said, "Oh, just kind of figuring out what I got going on." And he said, "What are you going to do next year?" I said, "I'm thinking about being a bronc rider." He goes, "Don't do it." I was like, "Well, why not?" He goes, "I need a partner." I said, "Well, what about you and Stewie?" He's like, wait, it just didn't work. And I need you to head for me, man. You've been roping good, like real good. Like you rope good enough to make the finals. You damn sure rope too good to be a bronc rider," he said. I don't know about that, but I was like, "Really, Buck? You want to rope?" He's like, "Hell yeah!" He said, "Come down here to Arizona. We'll ride horses and build fence, and you can shoe, and we'll get out there and we're gonna make the NFR next year." Well, when you get a chance like to rope with one of my heroes was Buck Campbell growing up, and you do it, and he was one of the guys back then. And so I packed up Oregon and went to Arizona and started roping for Bucky Campbell in 2002. And I remember before I left, one of my best friends growing up was Danny Johnston. He was my very best friend, and he was my go-to when my dad was hard on me. And he was when he lived up there in Canby, and anytime things got hard, he was my big brother. He was 10 years older than I was, and we'd been really good friends since I was 11 or 12 years old. I taught him how to rope. He come to the house and roped all the time. He was just kind of getting started, so him and I would rope a lot, and he was my best friend. And he was the guy that I always go to when I needed built up. He was the guy I always went to when I had problems. He was also my go-to when things went good. He was the guy that was always happy for me. When anything went good, he was my first phone call. I remember when I got my first girlfriend, he was my first phone call. All that, everything, he was always happy for me. But the good thing that I loved about that guy, about him too, was he also kicked my ass when I wasn't doing right. And when I had a chance to row with Bucky Campbell in 2002, he did, because I was over there shoeing horses for Dale Lyons there in the valley. And I'd stay at Danny's and I'd go shoe with Dale Lyons for a week, and I'd usually get caught back up money-wise and then get back out there. And so I'm staying at Danny's and told him about the chance I got to row with Bucky. And he sat me down and he says, "You need to quit screwing around. This is your shot. This is your shot to get out of where you're at. This is your shot right here. You've got way more talent than you're putting effort into. So don't screw this up. Try, get your butt out there and you freaking stay hooked. And this is opportunity. This is for you get your opportunity right here to get out of this place." Because I always told everyone I was going to rope my way out of Canby, Oregon. I made it obvious that was my goal, was to rope my way out of Canby, Oregon. That's how I got to college. And all of a sudden I kind of started coming back again. He's like, "No, remember, you're going to rope your way out of Canby, Oregon, and this is your shot. So take it seriously." And I remember it. I was like, yeah, this is maybe less partying, maybe less having fun, maybe less doing cowboy stuff. Maybe now it's time to see what I can do. And I tanked. I did. I got out there. I tried really hard, though. I did. I tried hard. But I think the pressure of the fact that I had a good partner, I put too much pressure on myself. And I roped good. I did good at the jackpots. I made, I did okay. But when it was come to the rodeos, I was trying to be consistent and I wasn't being fast enough. And I was trying to rope to not lose. And I could feel it. And it didn't take very long before Buck Campbell started kind of getting frustrated back there. And I could tell he was getting frustrated. Well, then I started roping worse. And I remember when we went to Texas for the rodeos in Texas, we stayed in Llano, Texas there in 2002 that winter. And so that was kind of our Texas home, was there at Tyler's. And Tyler Magnus was roping T. Woolman at the time. And that's when Speed and Rich lived in Llano. And, I was familiar with Llano. I'd been going over there quite a bit when Jason Stewart lived there and he had a place there. And so that was kind of the hot spot back then. It was kind of slowly migrating from California to Arizona. Now everything was migrating to Llano, Texas. A lot of the jackpots were right there. All your rodeos were right there close. And so that was kind of the spot. So if you wanted to be a team roper, that was kind of where you wanted to hang. And that's the one thing Buck kept saying. He's like, if you want to be around these guys, you got to stay around them. And so I took that seriously. So when we packed up and went to Texas, that's where we stayed. And just watching them practice, watching how they rode their horses, and was able to shoe for them still, and I was able to ride. Every once in a while, Tyler would throw me on one and let me ride some of his horses. And I remember we stayed at Speed Williams one year, my rookie year, and same thing. Guys would always let me get on their horses, and I remembered appreciating that. But I also remember too is they didn't mind letting me on, and so it kind of started led me think that I might have some skills here with some of this stuff. So I really always tried to remember what I felt and remember like what they were doing and try to implement and, copy all that. Try to be a sponge. I kept trying to be a sponge as much as I could without bugging them with questions, because I was always very embarrassed to ask questions because I didn't want everyone to know how much I didn't know, which was a lot. And so I ended up, after Houston, the rodeo Houston, we get back to Llano, and Buck says, "Hey, I think I'm gonna do something different." And I was like, "I don't blame you. I wrote very good for you, and spring's coming along, and so I get it." And so, anyways, I'm at Tyler's, and that same day I got cut, Tyler's hand that would ride all of his horses and turn him steers during the day and shoe all of his horses, he quit. He was moving back to wherever he was from. So Tyler rode up to me and says, "Hey, what do you got going on?" I said, "Man, I really don't know." He says, "What are you going to do?" "I'm thinking about riding broncs." He's like, "Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that." I'm like, "Well, why not?" He goes, "Well, I need somebody here to work for me." I'm like, "All right, well, we might put that bronc riding deal down for a little bit." Danny's voice is really, really resonating with me now. Like, "Hey, man, you get that opportunity to quit being cowboy, like take this seriously." So I'm like, "All right, we'll put this bronc riding deal down for a little bit longer." So I was like, "Man, now I got a chance to work for one of these guys." Now, Tyler at that point in time was he was known for his horsemanship. He was known for how well he could head and heel. And he's offering up a place for me to stay, horses for me to ride, horses for me to shoe. And he told me, he says, "You can turn steers for me during the week." And also, he says, T. Woolman doesn't go to all these places I go to, so some of these little backyard jackpots and rodeos, he said, "You can head for me there." And I was like, holy smokes, yeah, I'm in. I'm in. Well, I didn't have enough money to enter, and so, by then I'm broke. Me and Buck had done good enough jackpotting, but by the end of the winter, I hadn't roped good enough. I didn't hardly have much money to me. But the one thing I'd always gotten confident about was the fact that I knew it wouldn't take me long because I could shoe. My dad made sure he taught me how to shoe horses because he said, "Man, you'll never go hungry." And there was quite a few times me and Peppy and Armadillo would look at each other and rubbing our pennies together, wondering, okay, if I don't win something here, there may not be a shot where we may not eat tonight, because it was between bale of hay and, food. And I got to where I started learning a unique set of skills, which was I could hear what a shoe sounded like as it was walking across concrete or gravel when it was loose, or when a horse would walk across the asphalt and it was missing a shoe. That was the sound of lunch. And every time that I got close to being broke, I'd always hear a few of those lunch strides right there with that shoe's hitting unleveled, where I could tell that horse needed either redone or a shoe tacked on or the shoe replaced. And so that I will say one thing: me and my horses never went hungry because of that skill. And so when I got to work for Tyler, I just figured I'd probably have to shoe for a little while to get back home. But when he offered me that job, instantly put cash in my hand. Well, I still didn't have enough money to enter the jackpots. Well, he'd pay my fees for half. Well, we did really good. I worked for him for about a month, and I think we won. I think I ended up winning like 3,000. I think roping with him, going to jackpots and rodeos, and I think he's given me $1,250 to ride all of his horses, and then that was back when I got $500 to shoe, or $50 to shoe horses, and I think I ended up making another $1,500 just shoeing horses, and I've never made that much money in my whole life in 1 month working, and I was like, man, this is a really good gig. And he kind of started lighting the fire up underneath me. He started showing me how to win. That was the first time right there in my life to where I rode good and I roped good, but someone was showing me how to win. He was showing me how to ride your horse in the practice pen, how to set up a run, how to set up gain control of your horse, keep control through a jackpot, how to get the score, ride, rope, and be able to be ready to rope when you got there. I was starting to get better at rodeos. So he lit a fire back up under my butt and started giving me some confidence. So I decided that I'm going to give this one more shot. I'm going to make sure that when I leave here, I'm going to back my goals down for the first time. I'm wanting to make the NFR, and everything's been about the NFR since '98, since I got my card. And the couple things that I haven't done is I still have not won the amateur associations at home. I hadn't won the NPRA. I hadn't won the PWRA. I hadn't won the circuit up there in the Northwest. And I was like, I got me a new partner. Matt Funk was one of my good friends growing up. And I was like, you know what? I told him, I said, I want to win those three things. So instead of trying to make the NFR, how about we set some goals right here to where we go back home and we start kicking ass. Let's start getting some strategy going on here. And we went back up to the Northwest and we went to the good rodeos, the circuit rodeos, and all the amateur rodeos. And then by golly, by the end of the year in 2002, I won both amateur associations, almost won the circuit. That was when Guy, Greg, and Wade Jess had a phenomenal year, and they won second. But that didn't even top what Richard E. Guerin and B.J. Campbell were doing that year. Set a single season record for the most money won. And so the competition was pretty steep that year. But most years we would have won enough to have won the circuit. So I was pretty pumped. So the first thing I did when I got done at Pendleton and finished the Amateur Association year ends, I drove my butt straight back to Llano. I went right back to Tyler Magnus's house, man. I felt like I was at home now. I felt like I had me a spot. I felt like somebody had what I needed. Somebody had the information that I needed to have. I'm able to get around the guys now. I've got an in now to the guys that are good. So I went straight back, and I never even looked twice. And I tried to gain all the knowledge I could. I tried to ride all the horses I could. I tried to stay attached to that guy so close because he was loyal to me. When you're loyal to me, man, I stay hooked. And he gave me a shot, and I never forgot that. And man, he showed me so many different things. And the next year, me and Matt Funk, we decided to go a little bit more. Our goals weren't quite as much. We're still trying to win the circuit and the amateurs a little bit, but get to more rodeos. We want to see if we can make the NFR. Now, we did okay. We ended up still making San Antonio's. We made the Houston's. We made the building rodeos and things like that. We were doing okay, but we weren't just killing them. My jackpots were doing okay, but what I was doing was I was starting to build a herd. I was starting to add to Armadillo and Peppy. I was starting to get another one called Taz, even another crazy horse that I'd gotten up there at Tyler Magnus's, and was making a few horses on the side and selling them to the public. And still kind of getting a niche. I started dabbling a little bit in schools and kind of learning a little bit more of that, and starting to build up my income just a little bit where I was able to go more, and still shoeing horses and still riding them, and still trying to gain as much knowledge as I could. And 2013, we started buddying with Jason Stewart and Mike Beers and started learning more strategies on entering, going to some more big rodeos. And by the end of 2013, I was kind of bummed. We didn't have the year we really wanted, and didn't really. I think we ended up winning one amateur association, but I was kind of starting to get frustrated again. I was getting impatient. I kept thinking by now I should have made it. But in the same sense, I was still learning. Like I was very short-sighted. I wasn't seeing how much better I was getting. I was starting to fill in the gap. I was starting to get some knowledge. I was getting some experience. I was fine-tuning my skills and getting around the right guys and learning a lot. Well, I go back to Tyler Magnus again in 2004, and me and Matt Funk try it again. And we're kind of limping along. We're doing okay, but I started buddying with Mike Beers as second partners at the jackpots. Well, I'm kicking butt at the jackpots, but I'm not really just getting them right there at the rodeos. I'm still kind of struggling. I'm roping okay, but I'm still not really. And I'm getting frustrated. There's times that I'm turning steers and trying to get to that level right there in the practice pen. I'm probably a little bit putting too much pressure on myself, probably putting too much pressure on Matt. I'm getting frustrated. He was getting frustrated. Our frustration was starting to get obvious to each other, and he finally did the right thing and said, look, man, I think in order to maintain our friendship, I think it's probably best we go ahead, and I think we're trying too hard, and we're both too nice and too good of friends to let's call it quits. I think I'm going to go ahead, and he said, and I think we need to just go do something different and see if we can go try to find other partners and stuff. That way we don't, because neither one of us wanted to say it, but we both kind of knew it, and because we were good friends, and luckily we stayed good friends after that too. That sometimes ain't always easy to do. Team roping is very, very hard for longevity of friendship to rope with each other. You rope so far past the burnout stage when you're in the same rig with someone, and it's hard. And so that was the one great thing with him and I, is we maintained to be great friends. I was one of his biggest fans when he went to head, and so anyway, 2004 springtime rolls around, and I don't have a partner, and I'm thinking about, well, and I'm roping pretty good, but I'm still not winning. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I go back up there, see if I can find me another partner. Maybe while I'm still down here in Llano, maybe I can get up to the Yet Bowers. Maybe I can learn how to ride broncs real quick. I'm still taking this seriously. I'm not making sure my buddy Danny, I'm not letting him down. But in the same sense, I'm like, I still want to get on a bronc. I still want to be a bronc rider. Well, Mike Beers calls me out of the blue. He says, hey, Charlie, what are you doing? I said, well, trying to figure out what I'm doing. He says, what are you going to do this summer? I said, well, I'm thinking about being a bronc rider. I'm thinking I'm going to ride broncs. Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm like, why does everyone keep crushing my dreams? Like, why can't I be a bronc rider? And he's like, no, I need somebody to head for me. I need a partner. I'm like, you want to rope with me? Yeah, man, we've been doing good at the jackpots. He goes, no, I think we should try it. We can make it. You've had a good enough winter. We're kind of in the same spot. He goes, I've been roping Charles Pogue all winter, and he's going to go home, and I need a partner. And I'm like, all right, let's make the NFR. And he goes, but let's do it smart. And he started showing me strategies of how to keep my money together a little bit, like how to come back home and amateur a little bit, come back home and circuit rodeo a little bit, go back out there, try to win as much as you could back out the big rodeos, and come back home and get your money back together and get back out there. And I ended up having a pretty good year. I jackpotted really good. I was starting to win a lot more in rodeos. I started noticing, man, the guys that rope fast behind me is guys that was more of a comfort zone for me. I started noticing that I was hitting barriers better. And I started to notice when I would set him up to guys that throw fast, he held good behind me. So I kind of started finding out that year a little bit of where maybe my team strategy was a little bit. Now we didn't make the NFR. Um, I I didn't head that good to make the NFR, but I learned a lot. But one thing we did do, we kicked butt in the circuit. We kicked butt at the jackpots. I started getting my feet wet at the other rodeos right there, learning how the strategy worked, learning how to enter. Ended up being in the top 20, in the top 25, I believe, at the end of the year. Never broke that point. Was never in that category before. Finally won my circuit. Like I'm starting to slowly etch these goals that I had, but I had to give it time. I was just extremely impatient, but I was starting to notice I was fulfilling my goals. Well, after Pendleton, Mike's done. He's retiring for a little bit. And so I kind of had a little bit of a fire, a little bit under me. I was like, man, maybe let's not bronc ride quite yet. And I started roping with a kid named Richard Durham because as soon as I won the circuit, I went back to Tyler Magnus's again and went to fall rodeoing with him and going to all the jackpots and started roping with a kid named Richard Durham who threw fast, had pretty good horses, and he was hungry. And I roped good with him. And he was one of them kids that never made the finals who wanted to rope with me. And I noticed when somebody wanted to rope with me how much better I roped. And it was somebody too that I kind of built a team. I felt like I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I felt like I had an idea of how I thought I could make the NFR. And when him and I joined the team in 2005, we started off doing okay. I think we ended up placing at El Paso, placed along here and there, was doing pretty good at the jackpots if I remembered right. And then we were kind of limping along a little bit. We were doing okay. But Houston is where all of a sudden the bomb went off. We won the second round. Then I think maybe set an arena record on the third round or something like that. I can't remember for sure, but we made some great runs. That's when it was three head in a short round. So to win two rounds back to back at Houston was doing something. And then we go out west. We place at Logandale. We place it at all the spring rodeos. I think I come back home up there in Oregon, and I think I was in the top five maybe in the standings. Like I'm right there with them. My horse Armadillo's doing good. I got another horse named Taz that's doing good. Pepe's staying around a little bit. He's kind of getting older now, and at that point in time, but I still had him around. And then I invested in another horse named Tejas, who was just extremely easy. He was more of my horse that I had where the steers were fresh. He scored really good. He was really flat. He couldn't run very hard, but he could rate. And so I had an arsenal of horses that were starting to kind of get pretty good. And it was kind of hitting on all cylinders right about then. Well, I get back home that spring, and there just happened to be a little jackpot up there called the Open Corona that one of my really good friends put on up there, Mitch Hutchinson. He was a veterinarian up there in Spokane, and he had this roping called the Open Corona. Well, if you were one of the top ropers, you had to ride a bronc to enter the roping. And it was kind of a roughy team roping jackpot. But this was my chance to finally get on a bronc now. Now my dream has a chance to be fulfilled. And so I go up there, and I'm a little bit nervous because you can imagine all the guys go, man, you're in the top five in the world. You got a chance to make the finals. Now you're going to get on a bronc. But I was like, I'm doing it. Danny's calling, like, are you sure? Like, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is my chance right here. I've got to do this. I've got to do it. Remember, I want to be a bronc rider. And so this was what they call the bronc snubbing. So when you got up there, they'd get some bucking horses, and they would blindfold them out in the middle of the arena. And then two pickup men would get on each side of the bucking horse, and they would saddle the horse over the other side of the pickup horses. So they put a bronc saddle on him. They'd cinch him up, get him tight, put a flank strap on him. Well, I have to crawl over the pickup horse, the pickup man, and over his horse to get on this bronc. It was basically like the old days. That's how they used to snub them horses right there. They'd put a saddle on and blindfolded, and you crawl on the other horse, and you'd slip in the saddle. And I remember I had a very wide foot, and I remember it took me some work to get my foot in this stirrup on this bronc saddle. And I remember the pickup guys going, you better make sure you stay on because this ain't going to be good if you fall off. Because your foot's not exactly just going in the stirrup real well. So I was kind of a little arrogant, a little bit back then. I'm like, oh, piss, I'm going to spur the hell out of him. You guys better be ready. I said, I bet I spur this son of a gun so hard, I bet he quits bucking. And I'm talking at my butt because I know I'm probably going to get bucked off. But at the time, I'm like, nope, I'm fixing to give this sucker the Pittsburgh steel right here. So I get up all set up and I nod and they pull the blindfolds off and pull the flank strap and away we go. And I didn't spur him or nothing like that, but I dang sure stayed on pretty good. And as far as like a little ranch rodeo event amongst a bunch of other timed event guys and team ropers, well, I ended up winning a buckle. And I was on cloud nine. I was like, I'm finally kind of a cowboy. I'm not a full-fledged cowboy, but at least at that point in time, I felt like I was kind of a cowboy now. And, I was on cloud nine. And so I'm like, all right, well, now it's time to make the NFR. Let's get to it. Now I've gotten everything I wanted to get done. Now it's NFR time. And so we have us a stellar year. I mean, a stellar year. We ended up winning second at Reno. We won second at Cheyenne. We placed at all the big ones. And I ended up having the finals made by Cheyenne in 2005. And I remember just that feeling of when I went home, I'm like, I made it. I finally made it. And I remember that season when I left Pendleton and I drove back down to Llano. And I had the NFR made, and I just remember that drive and just going, just that rewind. Like, how did I make it? Like, when I started from Canby, Oregon, till now, like, man, just the people I surrounded myself with, the passion that I had, the fact that I didn't give up, the fact that I surrounded myself with the right people, the sponge-like mentality to where I surrounded myself around the guys that were good and just listened. I didn't hardly talk. I just listened. And then just tried to be a sponge, watch how they practice. And then one of my best friends, Danny, he made sure that, like, hey, this is time to take things seriously. Like, this is your time. And really made me pull my head out of my rear. My dad for giving me horsemanship skills. And it was fascinating to where that's when I started kind of thinking back to a lot of the 30-30s that I watched, a lot of the behind the musics. There was a lot of sacrifice. I didn't go to my homecoming. I didn't go to graduation. I missed a lot of my friends' weddings. There's a lot of things that I didn't do that a lot of other people did, because I had a passion to make the NFR and I had a passion to do something that I thought was really great. And from then on, I started taking it really, really serious. But I thought I could probably make it once. And that was the first time that I finally made it. I was like, I finally made it. I'm going to the NFR. And it was a feeling I'll never forget. The first one you're never going to forget. That's the time where you're like, oh, that one means a lot. That was a lot of that was very rewarding.